Broadcasting from the Podcast to Go-Go studio at Stony Brook University, our show The Comeback is sponsored by the School of Communication and Journalism and the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. My name is Melanie Formosa, and I'll be your host. Our purpose is to start a countdown to our hopeful return to normalcy following this past year's pandemic. We'd like to lead you into the fall with a weekly update on how we feel, look, and think about tomorrow. With me today to discuss the status of coming back is Judi Brown Clarke, Ph.D., the Chief Diversity Officer at Stony Brook University. Welcome, Judi.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
So as Chief Diversity Officer,
Yes.
and as we come back, this has kind of been a tumultuous year and a half.
It has been an incredible year on so many levels. All the remote learning, the social unrest, just, looking at health disparities. It's been a lot of navigation.
Last summer, now we're going into the summer, but just a year ago, it was really crazy. So what can we learn from that and apply it to the fall or this summer so we don't have to relive the whole thing?
I think right now what we're really focusing on is making sure that people are getting vaccinated, that they have access to the vaccination, and we're doing it here at Stony Brook and across our Stony Brook hospitals and so on, and we've been doing pop-up vaccinations, and I'm proud to say we've given out almost 300,000 vaccinations.
Wow.
We're doing testing here on campus, and I think that's one of the reasons our students and faculty and staff have been so, just have bought into how important it is that we're on campus. And so we've been able to stay open all this time. And that's a lesson learned to move forward with.
Promoting diversity is easy to say, right? But,
Yes.
but how do you execute it?
I think, diversity, equity, and inclusion are three different things. Diversity is a little bit more obvious. It's like making sure that you have diversity with ethnicity, gender identification. It could be religion. It could be whether you come from urban, rural. So it's really intersectionality as to who you are. One of the more difficult things is the inclusion. And that is like that feeling of belongingness. Is this my university? Do I feel like I belong? Do I see myself in the syllabus and the activities? Who is teaching? Who is serving in the different departments and so on? So that sense of belongingness is something that takes a lot of intentionality. And then the equity is just looking at it through that fairness lens.
It is hard probably to make sure that there is inclusion everywhere, because this is obviously a student population, and in order, you're doing your job, but in order to implement and make sure they do their job is tough.
It is. And looking at the students, I think one of the things that we work really hard on is to look at the entire student, every aspect of the way that you self-identify. And making sure that's in our policies, it's in our education, it's in our program, it's in our communication, and so on, because we want you to see yourself. And so our students are, they're international, domestic, first generation, non-traditional. Some are parenting. Some are taking care of intergenerational families. Some are commuting. Some are residential. Some are hybrid. All those different ways in which you describe who a student is how we try to take into consideration when we make decisions.
Food is comfort, at least for me.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm wondering, how do people who come from Romania, right?
Yes.
They have a certain cuisine.
Yes.
Their family cooks a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure that they eat what they're comfortable and safe with?
So one of the things, and if you're a residential student, we are always taking feedback through our food service and ensuring that we're listening. Is there a dish? Or sometimes it's not necessarily just a dish. It may be that you need pieces to it because you may, eat certain foods, but not necessarily all together within kind of that American cuisine. And so we have a real open reception to hearing from students if there's a particular dish that they want. We try to celebrate international heritage and or be it accomplishments or just different populations. And so we have a real international cuisine. And so we try very hard to think about, who are our students, and we know who you are. And then think of, what are the types of foods that you would be looking for, during your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because those are different meals in the way that you eat, as well as making sure different people have maybe medical reasons why they eat or personal choices the way they eat. So we really try to be equitable and inclusive in the ways in which we provide our meals.
What percentage of international students are here on campus or go to Stony Brook?
So our numbers are interesting right now. There's a lot of things that are happening with immigration, and that is, obviously has really impacted the number of international students that we have. Particularly certain countries are more impacted than others, and now with COVID protocols, depending on where you are, there's certain barriers whether you can travel and physically come on campus. And so our international population is lower than it's been, let's say, a year or two ago, because we're we're in 2 academic years of COVID, and 2 academic years of really navigating some of the challenges around immigration and visas and so on. So we're not out of the woods on that. So those numbers are fluid. I don't have the full count, but I do know that it's probably, somewhere around 50% less than 2 years ago.
In the fall, do you think that number is going to rise?
I think it will rise, but what we've had to do is we've had students that are international students that would typically be coming to Stony Brook actually take classes where they are. So they're a Stony Brook student, and under normal circumstances, they would be physically here in the dorm, but they're back at their home country taking classes. Some things are online, and some we've had some relationships with some of the universities and had some reciprocity. So you're taking a Stony Brook class at your home institution in your country and receiving Stony Brook credit.
Right. It must be hard. I'm not an international student, but I can only imagine, that feeling of not being able to be here without, because what I'm trying to say is I know someone who is from Nigeria, and she is here, and she's staying this summer, and she's been here this whole time, and just that inability to maybe go home or make the trip not so far away, yes. And feeling inclusive and here, feeling safe.
It's really tough because students have had to stay here, and typically they would have gone home 2, 3, 4 times. And that's the kind of thing that helps you touch base, is seeing your family. And some of our international students that are physically here are places where there's a lot of unrest. Some of our students from India, with all this ravaging of COVID, and there's social unrest in the Middle East. And so a lot of our students, when we think about things that are happening globally, 9 times out of 10 we have, or literally almost 10 times out of 10, we have a student or students who are physically and directly affected. Their families and who they are is affected by some of the unrest and weather and war and so on. So we're a really dynamic and very diverse campus, and that's kind of the beauty of Stony Brook.
For students who are from Long Island,
yes. How
do you ensure that they feel at home here with such a great international population?
I think that's the beauty, is under other circumstances, you'd have to go to different places to really see diversity and international communities, and to hear different languages. And one of the greatest things is, one of my coworkers always says, if you go to the train platform on Friday during a normal school year, it's like everyone's speaking a different language, and they're all going back into the city to visit or to go back home for the weekend. And so for someone from Long Island in your ability to really see all these, just, incredible eclectic mix of people and culture and voices and experiences and so on. I think it's just so enriching.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Wow. Have you traveled a lot?
I have. My background in sport for 7 years allowed me to go all over the world, and the beauty of I ran track.
In the Olympics,
in
right?
the Olympics.
Let's say that.
The beauty of the Olympics or of track is it's a low-cost sport similar to soccer, which means that, second and third world countries have a track team. So using that, I had an opportunity to travel all over the world, and I took full advantage of that. So I have 2 full passports of travel.
Wow. I don't know if anyone can say that. I've been to one country.
You got to travel. It really helps you realize how much bigger the world is than your experience and so on, and different cultures and food and processes and just species of nature and animals and just you just keep that on your calendar.
How has your own personal traveling affected your work as a diversity officer?
I think that is probably key and core to my ability to do diversity, equity, and inclusion within a global context. So I don't see it, within kind of a domestic lens, and that, international individuals are coming to me. I have friends all over the world and have been all over the world. So things that are occurring, literally, I can inbox someone and say, give me some insight on this. What does this look like from your vantage point? Because they're just representative all over the world and can give me the vantage point of boots on the ground as to where things are happening. And so my lens is very global.
And you've been a foreigner to many places.
Absolutely.
Right? So you know how it feels to not really... I don't want to say not fit in, because you should fit in. That's what we want, inclusion.
Right. Yeah.
But not living there, right?
Well, and not only not fitting in, but really being vilified, because there's times when I was traveling when the U.S. was at war, and we would go somewhere and there weren't very warm feelings related to having U.S. citizenship. So there are many times when I was traveling in the 80s where you couldn't wear anything that identified your country of origin.
Wow. So probably a lot of international students, maybe might feel the same way here.
I fully understand how they feel. Yes.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. As far as, I want to go back to like Long Island.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Because that's where we are.
Yes.
Where did you grow up? I should start off with.
So as a child, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was there until I was in 5th grade. And then I was in Kokomo, Indiana from 6th grade to 11th grade. And then we moved to East Lansing, Michigan when I was in my senior year of high school.
So you traveled a lot
I did.
as a child.
Yeah.
Wow. So now that you're living on Long Island?
I am.
So how does that differ from, because I know we have a lot of students from all over the country.
Yes.
How has it been not growing up here on Long Island and now working and being on Long Island? How has it changed your perspective?
So, first of all, it's beautiful here. It's absolutely beautiful. And I in Michigan, I was around the Great Lakes, and lakes look very different than an ocean. So that is a real different, I'm really adaptable. I can pretty much go somewhere and assimilate pretty quickly. And I take the time to really learn the culture and the feel and the people and so on. It's been a little interesting because I kind of came here right before COVID, and so things kind of sheltered in place. So this is really my first summer of going and seeing everything where people actually are. People would tell me something, I would drive by it, and there's no one there. So like all the shops were closed and whatever. So I'm really getting that sense and flavor of Long Island, but I'm really enjoying it here. My family's here. We're happy, and beautiful golf courses. My husband's a golfer, but it's a wonderful, wonderful culture and community, and so I'm very pleased.
As we come back to in-person classes in the fall,
Yes.
what advice can you give as far in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I think what students will see, and no, I don't think they'll see this. I know they'll see this because we worked very hard this last year, is like, how do we have inclusive classroom experiences? It doesn't really matter if you're doing math, if you're doing biology, if you're doing history, if you're doing art. We have an opportunity to really show the diversification of who was driving that knowledge forward, who was presenting innovation and so on. So what you'll see in the curriculum, what you'll hear within the classroom is this more inclusive and equitable way of talking about it. And even within math, anything can be computational. So how do you take the math and then, come up with constructs that you're using mathematical formulas to, but it's in a way in which you're talking about it in this even broader way. So I think our faculty have never been challenged necessarily to look beyond kind of the scope of their discipline, and they're all leaning in right now. We're doing trainings, we're providing information, people are going and getting certifications and so on, and so we're really growing, and so we want to make sure that it's in our DNA, and that's experiential. And when I said students will feel that inclusion and equity, we're hoping that and we're working very hard for that to be in the classroom, in the dorms, and within our food service, as you walk around and so on.
You said before that you're very adaptable.
I know.
I think that's something that really needs to be implemented into everyone, especially in this crazy time where nothing is certain. We need to be malleable and adaptable and just accept the ambiguity. Yeah.
And I think also the realization that you're not. I think that has probably been a lot of aha moments that people have, maybe within one context, they're very inclusive, but it's like, inclusive is inclusive. There's an inclusion of an inclusion. And so just because you may be inclusive of ethnicity, you may not be inclusive of gender identity. Or you may not be inclusive of someone that is, not domestic, that's an international. So I think people are realizing that they are doing some self-awareness, and it just makes you a better person. You know better, you do better, you are better. And reframing it that way is like, you just become a better person, a better friend, a better mate, a better parent, a better instructor, and so on. And when you frame it that way, then people are leaning in because, people want to be value added.
That's so interesting that there are different areas of it.
Yes.
Right. How do you, because prejudice is generational, at least in my opinion.
Yes.
It's passed down. You aren't taught to be, you aren't just prejudiced, you're taught to be.
Yes.
So with inclusion, how do we make sure that people have that in their mindset and aren't listening to what their grandmother said when they were 5 years old?
Yeah. One of the ways in which you address it is everybody's at a different level of readiness. And so for those that are ready, which means that you're curious, literally it's a pause and be curious. You pause in the way that you typically default think to be curious as to there may be something else. So if you see something, you may just automatically have a thought in your head. But if you pause on that thought, what other information do you need that confirms that your original thought was correct or not correct? That's kind of implicit bias, an interrupter. So I think, as you asked in the question earlier about, how does people from Long Island really benefit from this, is meeting different people, hearing different things, asking questions, observing, learning, listening. All those are the kind of things that help kind of disrupt that normal way of really narrow thinking. and expanding it to a way into a way that there's like so much more information you need to take in consideration before you have a judgment or a thought or an act. And so I really think the association of so many different people are really going to provide something that your grandmother and grandfather aren't going to get, and really expand you. And then learning how to love someone that you don't agree with.
That's important.
And it's important.
That is important.
They did not have the same opportunity to grow as you did. So you have to love them for who they are and just not agree with them. And that's okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So if say a person sees someone or
Yes.
something that happens and automatically they think a certain way that is not inclusive.
Yeah.
But they're open to changing.
Yes.
What should they do?
The very, 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 very first thing is to recognize that there's additional information. And I wonder what it is. That's that curiosity. And so looking at it, you may have seen something and you kind of have a perspective of it. So then where can you get your other information? It's almost like the research model. It's like, okay, so if I'm doing a lit review on this, what information? I need good information, not just like, I'll go to Facebook and ask my Facebook friends. Yeah. And how are they experts and credible? So where are your credible resources? And then, with your thought, inquire, read, watch something, go to a credible source to get some other information and learn about what does this actually mean? Why is there conflict? What is the historical construct of this? What don't I know? And you know what? You may come to the exact same conclusion as your first thought, which is fine. Or you may learn there's a lot more information, it's a little bit more complex, and that your thought was narrow and there's a lot of other things that need to be taken into consideration.
So basically doing your homework.
Do your own, and do your own work. Yeah, don't ask for a bunch of tutors like, hey, can you tell me about this? It's like, no, do your own work. Do your own work.
And don't rely on misinformation or disinformation.
Absolutely. And don't do confirmation bias where you're looking for things that confirm what you thought. And then you're like, see, they think what I thought. It's like, well, maybe. Was that a credible source?
Bursting out of that information bubble.
Absolutely. Expanding it. Because
I feel like we are in bubbles, at least what I know.
Yeah, there's safety bubbles. And I think it's, what, we love a sense of control, and part of learning and growing is giving up a little bit of that control of your knowledge base and realizing that some of those building blocks are going to get built upon and some are going to get removed and replaced. And you have to be okay with that.
You do have to be okay with that. And especially as we come back.
Exactly.
We have to have a new mindset.
And we're all part of the diversity, the equity, the inclusion, belongingness, social justice. Everybody has a role in that. It's not your faculty. It's not, we all, the only way it works is if it's in the DNA of the campus.
And cooperation.
Yeah. And forgiveness.
Definitely. And adaptability.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right.
Thank you so much, Judi.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was so insightful, and I hope people will take it to heart and pause.
Yeah. Pause and be curious.
Thank you. Well, that's all we have for today. Please join us for next week for another episode of The Comeback. Until then, hang in there and smile. I'm Melanie Formosa.